Hey there, Bruins fans! Welcome back to BNG Hockey, where it's always black and gold. I do apologize in advance for the voice, a little bit stuffy, but I'm going to fight through it for this video. The Boston Bruins have announced what will be their final round of cuts. They do have to cut one more player, but we will get to that later on in the video. This round of cuts, they cut Maxime Lagace, the goaltender. They cut forwards Jack Studnicka, Trent Frederic, Cameron Hughes, and Anders Bjork. They also send down forward Peter Cehlarik, but he has to go through waivers before reporting to Providence. He is currently injured, so it's highly unlikely that he's going to get picked up. There are also a lot better forwards out there that you could pick up if you needed to. Guys like Sven Baertschi, guys like Josh Ho-Sang for the Islanders. So I would think that teams would take a risk and grab those guys before Cehlarik, especially with the injury problems, but you never know, so we'll keep a close eye on that. Now, before I give you my thoughts on these last round of cuts and what I think about some of the players who are going to end up making this Bruins roster this season, I do want to talk about how the Bruins have to cut one more player, and who I think that player might be. It's most likely going to be a defenseman, and it's probably going to be one of the three: Conor Clifton, Steven Kampfer, or Jakub Zboril. I am actually surprised that Zboril has been hanging on this long. I do think Vakanainen will end up being better than Zboril in the long run. I think Lozon had a pretty good preseason, and we saw him a little bit last season. We've seen Zboril too, but I just don't think his ceiling is as high as it was when they drafted him. But clearly, the Bruins think they have something here. They're keeping him around. He even survived this last round of cuts, so they are thinking about keeping him on the roster. I just think you always go with the veteran if you're the Bruins, and you would keep Steven Kampfer, who played really well for you when he came in, even in the playoffs last season. And I really like Conor Clifton's game. I think he's going to be a great replacement for Kevin Miller, and even when Miller's back from injury, I think Clifton will end up taking that third D-pair right side spot. So my guess is the Bruins have to send down one more guy. It's going to be Zboril. Now, I want to talk about some Bruins that are going to be on the opening night roster, and I want to talk about some Bruins that they decided to send down, and my opinion on those players. I want to start things off with Anders Bjork. This guy has had a tough career as a Bruin so far, and he's still really young. Whether it be getting a top six role and just not fully grasping the opportunity, whether it be going through injury, he's had multiple injuries, whether it be doing really well in Providence, but being passed by other guys, and other guys are getting the opportunity and being called up before him. I do think Anders Bjork has a spot as a Bruin, and if he doesn't, they will probably ship him out of here in some sort of trade package, but I think that's later on down the road. I think they do want him to get a little more seasoning. They played him quite a bit in this preseason in a big role, even on nights where they were not sending out a lot of their starting forwards. Anders Bjork was their guy, getting top power play, top line. So I think that Anders Bjork is really on their radar this season, and if they need someone to be called up, I think Bjork is going to be the first guy to do that. As far as what he's going to be in the future for the Bruins, I think he's probably a top 9 guy, probably in the middle 6 range. I think if he's really going to explode, we would have seen that already. He hasn't played too much, but when he is playing, it's usually in a top 6 role, and we haven't really seen that much from him yet. So I think the Bruins get a little bit frustrated with that. That's why I wasn't surprised to see him be sent down to Providence to just get a little more seasoning, and then he'll be right back up if they need a guy. Now I want to talk about a player that I was kind of disappointed to see be sent down. It's forward Jack Studnicka. Now I realize he's still really young, and Bruce Cassidy himself said that if Studnicka is going to make the team, it's going to be as a center and not as a right wing. But I was kind of hoping that the Bruins did a thing like they did with Tyler Seguin earlier on in his career and played Studnicka in a top 6 role on the right side of either Bergeron and Marchand or Krejci and DeBrusk, and had him develop his game there and then switch back to center. And a lot of people get worried that if the kid isn't playing center all through the beginning of his career, then he won't be a good center in the future. But if you look at Tyler Seguin, he's doing just fine right now and is one of the elite centers in the league. So I don't think it hurt him playing a couple seasons at right wing. I realize that Studnicka you want to take the time to develop him, and you need a guy to replace Bergeron and Krejci, and that's coming pretty soon. And the Bruins have some good depth at center. They have Frederic, Beecher, Studnicka, so I realize that you really want this kid to develop into something nice for you, and you don't want to rush him when you don't need to. But I think he's ready. This kid has elite level speed. If you haven't seen it, watch a couple of his highlights. He scored a goal taking a puck off the face, lost some teeth, went right down the hall, got stitched up, and is right back out there for the next period in a meaningless preseason game. So I really like to see that. That's Bruins hockey. That's an NHL player right there. It shows that this kid wants to be out there. He wants to compete. I think he'll be a great future leader and an absolute stud for the Bruins. So he's going to get top line minutes in Providence. He'll work on his game, playing with some other young players like Lauko and Bjork, developing some chemistry there. So I'm really excited. If there is any injury, not that I want injuries, I would be excited to see Studnicka come up and grab a roster spot later on in the year. Now let's talk about some guys who are going to make the Boston Bruins roster for night one. Let's start off with forward Par Lindholm. Now a lot of you are a little bit iffy on this guy, I'm sure, and you're probably wondering why he made the team over a guy like an Anders Bjork. Well, let me tell you, even though he's played one season in the NHL, it was last season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, then he got traded to the Winnipeg Jets at the trade deadline. Playing in a bottom six role in Toronto can be weird because sometimes you're thrown out there in a situation where you're supposed to be putting up offensive stats. You look at a guy like a Tyler Ennis, or even when Nazem Kadri was in the bottom six. So I think Par Lindholm was a little bit uncomfortable with his role on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and there's obviously a lot of pressure playing in the big hockey market that is Toronto. Not that there isn't pressure here, but it's just different. Then he gets traded to the Winnipeg Jets, but they really didn't need Par Lindholm. It's just collecting bottom six forwards and seventh defensemen to go on a long playoff run. So they really just wanted extra NHL bodies, and they didn't really want the player. So I don't think he felt welcome there and didn't really feel like he was part of the team. He was just another addition in case Blake Wheeler goes down, that kind of deal. So now that he's with the Bruins, he signs a 2-year deal. He has a little bit of security knowing that he's here this year and next. He can develop some chemistry, and he has throughout the preseason, playing in pretty much every preseason game in the top six, in the bottom six. He's developed chemistry with a lot of the other Bruins players, young and veteran. So it's good to see that Parr is going to make this team. I think he's a solid fourth line guy. He's a classic Bruin who can score, 7 to 10 goals, hit anything that moves, be an energy guy, and kill penalties. He can do all of that for you. So you should be happy that Par Lindholm makes this team. Now I want to talk about forward Carson Coleman. I have not loved that the Bruins have basically gifted this kid the second line spot next to Krejci and DeBrusk. I know he came up for the Bruins last year in the playoffs, played really well, scored a great goal for Boston. They have tried guys like Ritchie and Coyle and Bjork. Ritchie should not be making your top six. Coyle is better as a center. They like him better as a center, so you have the three-headed monster of Bergeron, Krejci, Coyle. We already talked about how Bjork doesn't really fit into the top six. But I don't think Kuhlman is an elite level player or a top six guy. He's kind of fast, can kind of make plays. He was a captain before, an MVP level player in lower leagues. He had a great season with Providence last year. I get all that, but I think the Bruins still need some help from outside the organization. I think they need to make a trade and get a legit top six right winger, but hopefully Carson Coleman proves me wrong and he grabs onto that right wing spot and holds on tight all year. But I would like to see, if he struggles, the Bruins go out and make a move or bring somebody else up, because I just don't think this kid is ready for this kind of full-on responsibility in the top six. The last player I want to talk about is forward David Backes, everyone's favorite $6 million player. There was a lot of talk about him being traded this offseason. There was talk about him being sent down to the Providence Bruins. There was talk of the Bruins buying out his contract. None of that happened. He's here on the roster. They're paying him $6 million. It's go time. Another season with David Backes. But I must say, he has looked good in the preseason. He's not going to score you 25 goals. He's not going to be the top six player with Krejci and DeBrusk, even though we saw that a little bit in the playoffs. You're not going to see that. He's going to be a fourth line guy or a healthy scratch every other night, and we just have to accept that. But Backes has dropped a little bit of weight. He did finally work with a skating coach. He's realized that the NHL is getting faster and he's getting slower, and that's not a good thing. So good on Backes for, kind of swallowing the pill there and saying, I really need to work on my game if I'm going to stay in the NHL and if I'm going to make this team, because teams are getting younger and faster and Backes is getting older and slower. So hopefully Backes goes out and has a great season. I think they lit a little bit of a fire under him, not playing him in Game 7 against his old team. We're not going to talk about that too much, but I do think that he thinks about that a lot more than he says. So hopefully he goes out, grabs a bottom 6 role, gets 10 to 13 goals. That would be absolutely amazing at this point, and maybe you can even trade him if he has a good enough season. I don't really know, but I'm not surprised to see Backes make the team. They usually go with the veteran before the kid. If Backes is not playing well, they are not afraid to scratch him. We saw that. Bruce Cassidy putting in a Carson Coleman over a David Backes shows right there that in the biggest games, if they don't think Backes can go, they are going to put him up on the 9th floor, no problem. So I like to see that from the Bruins, and I hope Backes comes back and has a solid year for the Black and Gold. That's all I got for you in this one. We are just days away from Bruins hockey. I am so excited. I hope you're excited. If you haven't already subscribed, you should, because I'm going to be doing game recap videos after every single game. I'm going to be continuing to update you on roster moves, injury updates, trade rumors, trades, all of that. Anything and everything Bruins will be right here on this channel, and it's going to be a great year. You can talk with other Bruins fans down below in the comments, and we'll get a really nice community as we get going for another Stanley Cup run. So I will see you next time. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big like and make sure you subscribe.